you ever been to Disneyland?
Affirmative.
That was definitely an e-ticket.
I can't believe all the new gadgets they've got now. For a while, we didn't even have a house phone, not to mention laser discs, high-def TV.
You are listening to The Great Big Beautiful Podcast. This week on the show.
Every now and then, I'll walk up and say, look, I know you think I might be kind of a weird homeless guy, but I actually was Raphael. No way. Yeah, what's your name? Rob Paulsen. Shut up. I know who you are. Oh, my God. It's Raphael. Oh, my God. Let's get a selfie. And it's fantastic and humbling and all of that. And the bottom line is nostalgia is nostalgia. And whether it's good or bad, it makes you feel good and you want to share it with your children.
Yeah.
That's great.
Here are your hosts, Jamie Green and Justin Connors.
Welcome to the Great Big Beautiful Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at the GBB Podcast. Find us on Facebook at the GBB Podcast. And we are all over the Geek Dad website. Go get all of our episodes on iTunes. We're just going to promote the crap out of this right off the top.
Do it. Do it. Promote it.
Promote it. So this week, we're kind of going back a little bit to our childhood and bringing nostalgia up. And do you remember how great and this is just me talking, how great cartoons were when we were young? Disney afternoons.
Yeah,
Batman, the animated series.
So here's the thing. Okay, Batman, I will give you. Batman is, I still think, I used to say it was the greatest animated show ever made.
Right.
And I still think that it's in the top 3.
Right.
I mean, you hear that we're at the age now where we're like the surly old get off of my lawn.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And it's like cartoons were better back in my day. And they were and they weren't. You know, I mean, we look at them, like you were saying, we look at them through this lens of nostalgia. And it's like we have such fond memories of coming home after school and watching the Disney afternoon. You know? So we got the Gummy Bears and DuckTales and Tailspin and all those shows.
Darkwing Duck.
And Darkwing Duck. But many of those shows, and I'm not singling out the Disney afternoon, but many of the shows that we remember from our childhood don't really hold up that well. I remember, case in point, I remember as a kid loving the Snorks. Now, did you ever see the Snorks?
It doesn't come to mind. I know what it is, but
they're like the underwater Smurfs.
Right.
You know, they've got like these appendages on their heads. That's basically their underwater Smurfs.
Yeah.
And I remember loving them. And then a few years back when my kids were really little, I found them. It was like on TV or something. And so I DVR'd a few, or I found a disc. I don't remember what happened. And I popped it in. And I said, "Oh, you guys are going to love this." And we sat down to watch the Snorks, and it was awful. I mean, I've probably seen worse television, but it was not entertaining in the way that I remembered it being.
Right.
And so I think it's unfair to say that cartoons today are not the way that they were then. We don't have Saturday morning cartoons anymore, that's for sure.
Right.
But I think that there are some phenomenal animated shows out there.
Right.
We've got Avatar, and you've got Korra, and you've got Star Wars Rebels, and you've got some of the other, the Marvel, the superhero shows that are out there, the Justice League. I mean, there have been, over the last 5 years, there have been some phenomenal Young Justice, some phenomenal animated series.
Well, even if you go back to the generations before when we were kids, and they still are, like, if I catch a Flintstones marathon, I'm watching.
Oh, yeah.
The Jetsons, I'm there. I'm sitting and I'm watching it for hours.
Absolutely, me too. I mean, I love the Jetsons. Johnny Quest. Johnny Quest is before my time, but it was on TV when I was
on Cartoon Network, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the box set now, and my kids like it. We'll sit down and we'll just watch a few episodes of Johnny Quest because it's just that awesome.
Right. So we're talking to, and speaking of nostalgic, kind of segue into who we're talking to today. I'll never forget, like, there's a few moments in your life that kind of stand out to you, and I'll never forget the first 2 times I saw Pinky and the Brain on Animaniacs. And a lot of people, to this day, Pinky and the Brain were so memorable that a lot of people that don't even remember that they were inside of another television show. Yeah. They think they just stood alone. That's how, you know what I mean? That's how great
it was always just Pinky and the Brain.
Yes, exactly.
They were just a segment on Animaniacs.
Exactly. And you don't know how many people that when I bring it up, they're just like, that show, Pinky and the Brain. And they it's just a testament to how great the show was. And we're talking to Rob Paulsen.
Oh, am I supposed to take it up?
Sorry, I didn't know where I was going. And we're talking to Rob Paulsen today. And Jamie, why don't you tell us a little bit about him?
I don't even know where to begin. I mean, Rob Paulsen is one of those guys who, if you go to his IMDb page, you'll just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I mean, he has voiced over the past 30 years, something like that. He has voiced hundreds, literally, no joke, no exaggeration, hundreds of characters.
Mm-hmm.
He is, as you mentioned, probably best known as Pinky from Pinky and the Brain. He was Yakko on Animaniacs. He was Raphael in the original 80s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. On the show that's on TV now, he's Donatello. So he's one half of the Ninja Turtles, depending on how you look at it. He was the Mask on the animated series. He was Gusto Gummy. He was Pete Jr. from Goof Troop in the Goofy movie. He was Snowjob and Tripwire on G.I. Joe. If you're a Joe fan, I mean, if there was a show you remember from any point between like 1985 to today, chances are really good that he was involved somehow. If he wasn't a main character, he at least, he appeared in an episode or two as some background character or as a recurring character. He's one of those guys who is he's been around, not forever, but he's an industry legend at this point, just for the sheer number of characters he's voiced and the number of iconic characters that he's brought to life.
Right. And we're going to play this interview for you. Also, pay attention because he's also in one of the most major motion pictures of all time. He did some voice work. We found out about it today. It was kind of, I think, Jamie, did that catch you by surprise?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew he had been, again, it's a live action movie, what you're talking about. He did not appear on screen. He just did voice work for background characters. But it is not an animated movie, and I had no idea.
And we're not going to tell you which one because we're totally clickbaiting you. You have to listen.
Well, they've already clicked at this point.
You have to listen to it now. Scroll through it and find it. All right, guys, we're going to play the interview right now.
First of all, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we've both been huge fans of yours for probably even longer tthan we realized there were actually people behind those voices we were watching on TV.
Well, thank you, guys. That's really very kind of you to say, and all that just reinforces the fact that I'm getting older, which I suppose beats the alternative. So
it does beat the alternative, but that's not what I meant.
No, I know you didn't, and I appreciate your kind remarks. I've been an incredibly lucky fellow for
well,
for
I
a
mean,
long time.
over the years, I mean, you've voiced hundreds of characters, and I'm just curious, is there a difference in your approach for when you have to come up with a new voice for a new character versus sort of mimic one that already exists and is well known, whether if you're taking over for somebody who already established a character?
Oh, that's a great question. In terms of well, probably in terms of the preparation and contextually, I guess. I mean, I try not to make this too, make it sound more fancy schmancy than it is. But I mean, if I were to take over for an existing character, and as I recall, the only time I've ever done that, and that I recollect, in something that was already pretty established, was one of the very, very first shows I did that was a big deal for me. Certainly was Johnny Quest, and you guys weren't even around. But when I was a kid, Johnny Quest was a big deal on ABC, I believe. I think it was a primetime show. I don't know if younger people realize that primetime animation, like we have on Fox,
right,
is not a new phenomenon. That we had that in the 60s and 70s with Johnny Quest and a show called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, The Flintstones. Those were all primetime animated shows. And in those days, Johnny Quest, oddly enough, was voiced by Tim Matheson, and he had, as you may recall, a sidekick, little Indian boy, Middle Eastern boy named Haji. And I was lucky enough to voice Haji in the second iteration of the show that was also produced by Hanna-Barbera, who produced the original show in the early 60s. And so that was one of those where I essentially matched the voice.
Right.
But I'm not really good at that. for instance, when an actor passes away and you have a franchise character like Mickey
Right.
or Goofy or something, thank God the actors who are doing it now are all very healthy. But I wouldn't even waste Disney's time because I don't have that skill set. I'm much better at creating my own. I'm a pretty good mimicker, not an impressionist. Maurice LaMarche and Kevin Michael Richardson and Billy West and John DiMaggio, those guys are way, Frank Welker, way out of my league. And Jeff Bennett, another one. Super good at that, and I'm not. I'm smart enough to know what I'm not very smart at, and that is one of them. But yeah, so if I do take over, then it's about the context and trying to honor the character and the relationships that character has with the other characters in that show or series, versus coming up with something that's original like Pinky or Yakko or whatever.
Right.
Then the context is a little different because everybody is new and different.
Right.
Animaniacs was as an example, was a clean sheet of paper, literally. And so everybody was kind of at the same starting point. Johnny Quest was an example in which I had, a pretty good idea of what Haji sounded like and how he behaved and all of that. And so I just did an impression of, I think the guy's name, actor who played Haji in the original show, was a guy named Danny Bravo.
Okay.
I've never met him. I think he was Canadian, oddly enough, and I don't know him. I don't know that he did anything else, but certainly they wanted me to sound as much like the original as possible, and so I did. But yeah, it's a little different, but still the bottom line is you just try to make choices that are interesting and in the context of what the creators want, and hopefully you do it well enough so they don't fire you.
So generally speaking, when you're given a brand new character, how much information do they give you? Do you get an illustration or a backstory or anything like that, or they just say, we need a voice?
Yes, as much as possible. If it's a brand new show, then absolutely. They often come up with something called a Bible for the show, which is essentially what you would think. It's a compendium of all the characters, their relationships to one another. Usually, a couple of. Every character has a several dimensional rendering, whether it's 2D drawing or CGI. So you get how they look when they're happy and mad, or screaming or yelling or singing or crying or whatever. Mm-hmm. So you get an idea of what the artists are able to do, and then once you kind of get rolling in the show, the writers tend to write a bit differently if the characters become a success. Pinky the Brain was an example where once the show kind of became its own entity, the writers would not only write for the characters, but they knew the idiosyncrasies that Maurice LaMarche and I had, that we would, things that we would do to tweak the characters to make them our own, and so they would write accordingly. Jimmy Neutron was the same way. The writers did a great job. That's a really great example to me of where I played a character called Carl Weezer, the little fat guy on Jimmy, and that was a great show. But they did a very, very good job of rendering the character to work with the affectations and the traits that you brought to it. Character. Yeah, and then they would write accordingly, and it was really good. If you look at Jimmy Neutron and Carl specifically, sort of halfway through the run of, I think we did like 100 episodes, and then the 30s and 40s episodes from then on, I think it became really more. It's a hackneyed, fancy schmancy phrase, but the character definitely became a little more organic and it was pretty seamless in my view. I thought the animators did a brilliant job, and the writers also did a great job of writing to my strengths. Mm-hmm. And it pays off, because I think that's one of those shows that young folks or people can watch, even older folks. People like animation. Jimmy Neutron's a great show. Yeah, very clever. It doesn't condescend the audience, and Carl's a cool character. And I'm just the actor. I don't write them and I don't draw them. So those, it really is a deeply collaborative effort. And I think the characters that convey, that's not the right word, characters that last a long time and that become iconic. I don't know that, my characters, and I say my in quotes, the characters that I've had the pleasure of working on have yet become iconic. And I think
so.
Some of them. Thank you. It may be a question of time. But, Bugs or Daffy or Rocky, Bullwinkle, all those characters are beautifully executed from every aspect. And they are relevant because just like any good movie, you can watch Pride of the Yankees or Wizard of Oz or Chinatown or whatever you want. If it's well produced, well acted, well constructed, the story is solid, then they last.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people can watch Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain 20 years later and say, God, the music still holds up. Those shows were written very specifically and absolutely on purpose for adults and children, not to condescend to the audience. And I think it shows the genius of Steven Spielberg and Tom Ruegger and the people who created that stuff because it was absolutely on purpose. So people your age can watch those shows now and say, holy shit, I didn't get that when I was 9.
Yeah.
I just liked hearing United States, Canada, Mexico, Canada, but now I get it.
Yeah.
And that is on purpose.
Yeah, it's funny. I just started, relatively recently, rewatching them with my kids, and we're both enjoying it. And again, it's, we laugh at the same jokes, and sometimes it's for the same reason. Sometimes it's because I get them at a different level.
Totally right.
But the show, I was actually surprised because I hadn't seen it since I was much younger.
Yeah.
And it really does hold up. And I was really surprised at how well it holds up today. The jokes still work.
Jamie, I agree with you. And as I say, I think I'm pretty much able to be objective. It's long enough now that we haven't done one, and since I think Pinky and the Brain was the last one we recorded was in 1999. So it's been long enough that although they're dear to me, that I can be a pretty objective. And I have my ego, if nothing else, my ego is in check. And I have no problem when somebody says, "Oh, that's pretty awful," and I say, "Yeah, you're right." And not everybody does everything that knocks it out of the park, but Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain, the Mask to some extent, the Tick certainly, Jimmy Neutron, those shows, and then some of the Disney afternoon stuff, Darkwing Duck, even Gummy Bears and another Warner Brothers shows, Tiny Toons. I did a show called Tasmania. If you can watch those shows, they hold up beautifully.
Yeah.
And I recall when we were doing them thinking, oh man, these guys really know what they're doing.
This is something
and
special.
by the same token, if you go and watch, and even if your children haven't watched Rocky and Bullwinkle or the Flintstones, or those shows were very hip and topical for the time, and they hold up well too.
Oh, absolutely.
It is by design, and it's I'm kind of rambling and got off point, but it is meant when you have the time and you have talent on both sides of the glass, and you have a guy like Steven Spielberg running the show, and you can have 40 pieces in every half hour for the music, and it is a unique experience and holds up.
Yeah.
That reminds me of, this is a little further along in our question, but you mentioned it, so I just wanted to bring it up here. Often I get nostalgic about remembering the animated shows from when I was a kid, the Disney afternoons, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then even further back, Scooby-Doo and Flintstones and Jetsons and stuff like that. It doesn't take me long until I start asking why we don't seem to have shows like this. And I'm wondering, am I being unfair and just looking through a nostalgic lens, or are we really not hitting that mark anymore with the current animated television?
Well, that is a very intelligent question, and I Josh, and I think yes and no, if I can be a little bit trite. And the reason I say that is because every generation, I submit, has their special stuff. When I was a kid, and I'm a big rock and roll fan, I got my start as a singer in rock and roll bands and all of that. I learned how to read music, and that kind of propelled me doing stage work. But I remember my parents. Fortunately, my parents were not so averse to me and my siblings listening to popular music that they put the kibosh on it. They were like, "Look, if you want to listen to Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Who and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Steely Dan. You can do that, but you also have to listen to Prokofiev and Shostakovich and Mahler and and I have a deep appreciation for all styles of music, whether it's bluegrass. I love Doc and Merle Watson as much as I love Bruno Mars. And good stuff is good stuff. But there's a great song in Bye Bye Birdie, and the song is called What's the Matter with Kids Today, and of course the hook is, why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way? What's the matter with kids today? And every generation has that, whether it's their sort of social mores or things like their entertainment. Boy, they don't make them like they used to. And we would hear the same thing. I think that there's certainly in my lifetime, I'm almost 60, so I'm old enough to pretty much be your parents. And I certainly went through a period where I thought, wow, this is essentially a half-hour commercial to sell action figures.
Right.
And and I have to say, Ninja Turtles, the first iteration of Ninja Turtles was like that in a lot of ways. And when I go back, my son is 31 and was a turtle fanatic. I mean, a freak. And it was as a side note, really lovely thing to be able to, for both of us, I think, for his old man to be Raphael, and for my kid, to have a little boy. It was huge fun. But when I go back and watch Ninja Turtles, especially the later couple of seasons, and I kind of go through them, or they show up on TV, and it kind of catches my eye, and I say, oh, yeah, that was great. I remember that episode. And sometimes the animation is awful. They have Raphael the voice coming out of Donatello's mouth because the mask color is different, whatever. I mean, it's just, and certainly it got to a point, I think, where they were wringing every last nickel of interest out of the show to sell another action figure. And that's fine. I'm a capitalist. I get it. I totally understand that. But at the same time, there were other shows just beginning, Transformers, G.I. Joe, that spawned an incredible amount of interest, and to the extent that there's every 2 or 3 years there's another Transformers movie coming out, and a whole new generation loves them. So I know we didn't have nearly the adult animation that we have now. The stuff that people get away with on Family Guy and American Dad and The Simpsons would never, not only never have flown on television, but it never would have gotten that far.
Right.
Never. And honestly, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think that all it does is make people like you have to be more responsible parents.
Right.
Because, you can't, you guys have to contend with the internet and computers and 18,000 different satellite channels. We never had to do that. There were 3 networks and local TV, and you would never have sexual references or overt homosexual references or anything like that we're used to now. Look, my brother is gay and my son is married to a black woman, so I'm fine with whatever you want to put out there. It's not a judgment call. It's just something that I also understand, having come from the Midwest, that there are a lot of people between Los Angeles and New York, or between, if you will, Vancouver and Toronto, who don't have the same sensitivity to certain things, and so you have to be aware of that. Anyway, my point is that I think that through the lens of nostalgia, you look at stuff and you go, God, that was so great. It's not as great as things are today, and then you take a look at some of the stuff that's out there, like the animated features that are coming out every other week. Some of them are unbelievable.
Oh, for sure.
My God, what's the one with Amy Poehler? They just
Inside Out.
Yeah, spectacular.
Unreal, wasn't it?
Oh my God! And we didn't have any of that when I was a kid. You had the occasional Disney feature, and they were always marvelous, and they clearly stood the test of time. But we didn't have nearly the amount of. There are 24-hour animation channels, stuff on YouTube, proprietary stuff. I'm doing 3 separate shows now for DreamWorks that are specifically for Netflix, not for broadcast any other place.
Yeah.
So you have all these different platforms and stuff. And I think it just depends on how hard you want to look. I know that I remember as a kid kind of liking Speed Racer, and when I watch it now, I think, what was I thinking? It's awful. It's the animation is bad. The acting, in my view, is bad. But it is an iconic show and sells T-shirts, and people feel good about wearing a Speed Racer T-shirt. Man, I see people all the time in original Ninja Turtles T-shirts, and every now and then I'll walk up and say, "Look, I know you think I might be kind of a weird homeless guy, but I actually was Raphael." No way, man. What's your name? Rob Paulsen. Shut up! I know who you are. Oh my God, it's Raphael. Oh my God, let's get a selfie. And it's fantastic and humbling and all of that. And the bottom line is nostalgia is nostalgia, and whether it's good or bad, it makes you feel good and you want to share it with your children.
Yeah,
that's great. It is rare that you have a show. If I may be so bold to say to do a show like Animaniacs, where you have great music, interesting animation, interesting stories, Steven Spielberg, music, blah 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 blah. That's rare,
sure.
And so you guys, I presume you're in your 30s. You guys were born at a time in which animation really just began booming, and so now you have an incredible amount of stuff from which to choose. And you're probably in the same age range as my kid. And my son, when he was a kid, loved the Muppets and Sesame Street and Big Bird. And, I could watch that all the time. I loved it. If my kid had come around a little earlier or a little later, and had to watch Teletubbies and Barney, I'd have shoved the gun in my mouth. Oh, my God. And I understand as a parent, I understand why those shows work. I understand that they're rudimentary and that they help children understand the building blocks of reading and writing, and I get that. But in terms of having to sit down and watch something with your kid, hell, I'd much rather watch Animaniacs or the Muppets than Barney.
No.
Yeah?
We're on the same page, I think.
I think so.
I mean, if knowing what you know now and how the two shows affected your life and your career, if you had to go back and choose to do only Turtles or only Animaniacs, how would you choose?
Boy, I've never been asked that question. What a great question. See, Josh, Jamie's not as stupid as you told me. He's really an idiot. I think if I had to make a choice, I would probably choose Animaniacs only because I really like singing more than anything. I love to sing. And I had the pleasure of working with Steven Spielberg and a couple of other things. I worked with him on a show he did, a live-action show, because I came to L.A. ostensibly to do live action, and I did TV and a few movies and a lot of commercials. But he hired me on a show he did called Amazing Stories. I did a lot of voice work on E.T., and so I'd already had the great good fortune of working with Mr. Spielberg on a couple of things.
I don't mean to interrupt, but what did you do on E.T.?
Oh my God, I did a bunch of voices of doctors and.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And I remember at the time we worked on it was 1982-ish. At the time, the movie was entitled A Boy's Life, and we did all the post-production work that I was involved in over at the Universal Studios on a soundstage in which Stephen was there, but the creature, whenever E.T. showed up on the screen, the creature was blacked out. We had to sign non-disclosure agreements, and he wanted to make sure that nobody saw the creature, and I totally understand that, But it's pretty fun now. Every now and then I'll get a little residual check for 37 cents. It's pretty cool to have been involved with something like that. But the point was I had the great good fortune of working with Mr. Spielberg on things. He was absolutely delightful to everybody with who was an editing recording session, myself included. So when and that is not to take the piss out of Ninja Turtles, man. I'm a turtle again, 25 years later. So you're talking to one incredibly fortunate middle-aged white guy. But and I remember telling Tress MacNeille on more than one occasion, "Wow-wee, man, this is as good as it gets." Unless you're on The Simpsons, and of course Tress is, but unless you get on The Simpsons, this is as good as it gets. You have Steven Spielberg, Tom Ruegger, Gene McCurdy, Warner Brothers, the home of Bugs and Daffy and Tweety and all of that. And you have Steven's name and his talent, and we get 40 world-class musicians in Hollywood to play music in every half hour. And then we've got Maurice and myself and Frank Welker and Billy West and Jeff Bennett and Jess Harnell and Tress McNeil and Nancy Cartwright and Bernadette Peters, and my God, on and on and on and on and on. And it just didn't get any better. So I think if I had to make a choice, then that would be it, because it ticked every box.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a successful show for its own sake. That is to say, the fact that they had the Warner Brothers studio stores notwithstanding, there was relatively little merchandise that went along with Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. Yeah, T-shirts and cookie jars and stuff like that. But
it wasn't the juggernaut that Turtles was.
Yeah, it wasn't driven by that. And that, either way, it's fine. You know, it's me. So you have something, and to this day, I don't care if I'm talking to a professional athlete or somebody in a restaurant, whatever. Once people find out who I am and what I do or what I did, and that particular show comes up, either Animaniacs or Pinky and the Brain, I mean, they really get excited. It's not like they just kind of go, hey, that was a cool show. They just go, oh, my God, I love that show.
People are very much attached to it.
Totally. Do you still know the countries of the world, and you still talk to Yakko Wacko God? No, you know, and so it was not only a watershed moment for my career, but it is a really, really good show, and I think important in the sort of cultural entertainment landscape, you know.
Sure.
But Turtles is too. I just think from a personal point of view, and it was a great question. Thank you. That I would certainly have to say that, only because I got to do a whole lot of music with people who are still working today. You know, Maurice has now won 2 Emmys for his work on Futurama, and Press has done over 500 Simpsons. And so you look at all the people who were kind of really in the middle of their careers, and now we're all in our late 50s and our mid-60s in some cases. Frank's going to be 70. And you look at that group of actors in that circumstance, and it doesn't get much better.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned music and the countries of the world, the nations of the world song. How many times do you think that you've sung it at this point?
Oh my God! Well, let's see, 1,762. No, 63.
Do you ever get tired of it? Like I know when
Never,
you do panels, that's sort of like a mainstay of your panel appearance. People just want to hear you do it.
Absolutely, John. No, I never get tired of it. And the problem is when people stop asking.
Fair enough.
I have been incredibly fortunate on many levels, in many ways, and not the least of which are things like this. You two guys are nice enough to take time out of your day to talk to me and make me feel special and all of that. And I'm very clear. I understand that the characters are the movie stars. I'm part of the equation, and I'm good at my job. But you know, people don't stand in line to see the next Rob Paulsen cartoon because it's my voice. I'm not. It's not false modesty. I'm good at my gig, but it's different, and I totally get that the characters are the stars. So, you know, I am always happy to do that song. And Randy Rogel, who wrote that and wrote the lion's share of the songs that you guys would remember from Animaniacs, it's pretty cool because as another illustration of how that show has held up, we got permission from Steven Spielberg and Warner Brothers a couple years ago to take a musical show, a musical Animaniacs sort of evening with type of show around and do it with symphony orchestras. And I got to tell you, man, when you see what we'll do is have like a giant 50-foot screen in the background, and the cartoons played in real time. So when you hear the band, you know, go dun 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 dun, United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, in real time to the cartoon with an 80-piece orchestra, it's mind blowing. And the music holds up great. And every time that song is done, people stand up. Yeah, they just do. And I don't care if it's in the middle of the show or done as an encore. And that is not only a testament to the strength of the show, but really Randy Rogel is pretty remarkable talent. And again, kind of hitting on what I was talking about earlier, where we're all still doing our gig, and that group of actors was a group that was not just destined to do one thing. You know, they've all gone on. Randy now is, he and I, as I say, we take our show around, but Randy's, working on 7D for Disney, and he's writing a musical version of Parenthood with Ron Howard's company with Bob Lou Mandel and Lowell Gans, and he wrote a song and Rio 2 that Kristen Chenoweth sang. And I mean, the guy's, kicking ass, and he's never slowed down. I never get tired of singing that song. And inevitably, I'll meet somebody who says, "Hey, I know the whole thing." And usually, whenever I do a live appearance, I'll say, "Okay." And there'll be people standing around. "Okay, everybody, fire up your cell phones. Here we go." Myself and my buddies Jamie and Josh, we're going to sing "Country of the World." And they're so adorable, and they get all nervous and they blow through it, and they fall apart at Lithuania, and then we pick it back up, and it's really fun. But the thing is that I can't get tired of it because it is a pure expression of love and admiration for something that I was lucky enough to work on and get paid to do. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be incredibly inappropriate for me to even remotely be
tired of it,
frustrated. Yeah. No, I'm a pretty happy guy about doing that stuff.
I assume Pinky is probably the voice that you're most often asked to do when people meet you, but what are the other popular characters? And have you ever been surprised, like, if somebody asked you to do somebody that, like, you maybe forgot that you even did?
Yeah, I had a guy a while back. I think I was in a personal appearance, and he said, "I love Bubsy the Bobcat," and I said, "Bobcat? What the hell?" Oh my God! Yeah, that was a goofy video game / cartoon. It was awful. Awful. And the guy said, "You still know Bubsy?" And I said, "Whoa, dude, you're on the spectrum for sure." No. I said, I think I do. And the guy was, a little out of his mind because he wanted me to do, and he freaked out when I did, this. And I should qualify that. When I say it was awful, it was. But, nobody starts out to make a bad show. Nobody takes $1 million of their own or somebody else's money, or several $1 million, and says, "I'm going to make a piece of shit."
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it turns out that way, but hey, I have no problem taking the check. So it's I really have to be careful that I don't denigrate things for which I was paid handsomely. But, in the fullness of time, you look back and you go, "Boy, that really was a clinker." And so, yeah, that's every now and then, or they'll come up with something that's very, I've done quite a few different characters and quite a few shows, and so sometimes I'm a, second or third thug, and it's surprising what people remember. I think because of Wikipedia and IMDb and all these.
It's all out there now.
Oh my God, it's totally out there. So they'll say, "Remember when you were the talking banana on Akko's Modern Life?" And I think I truly don't. I've probably been other talking fruit, but I don't recall that particular one. And I'll do what I think they're asking. No, man. It wasn't that. It was something else. Remember, it was more like, dude, I'm so sorry, but you lost me. But you're right, though. People, they love Pinky. They love to hear Pinky. And they love Yakko. And a lot of people surprisingly love Carl. Women especially love Carl. I think because he's completely non-threatening, and they know that he'll never do anything that's, inappropriate because he's just a mess. Give Carl a couple of Vicodin and a vodka tonic, and
that's what he needs right there.
Yeah, man.
Do you ever think that the animated world do you think we're ever going to see another duo as perfect as you and Maurice?
Oh, bless your heart. Boy, that's very sweet. And I don't know, man. It's interesting that you say that, because I remember when my son was little and, Beavis and Butthead was really popular.
Yeah.
Of course, he was at an age where my wife and I were like, Beavis and Butthead. So why don't we say, well, screw it. You can't keep him from it. Go ahead and watch it. And he watched, I think, 3 or 4 episodes. And then, he kind of thought, oh, well, it's going to be about farts and boobs. And okay, I get it. What's next? and so I think that, and that's no swipe at Mike Judge. I mean, he did King of the Hill, and he's an incredibly gifted fellow. But Pinky and the Brain is a good relationship. It is a great 2-character punch. And it does stand the test of time. And when Maurice and I do personal appearances together, like an afternoon with or an evening with type of thing, I mean, we easily get 400 or 500 people to come out and hear Pinky and the Brain, not only do, chunks of old scripts, but we'll do Who's on First, and we'll do the Abbott and Costello thing as Pinky and the Brain. It's freaking hysterical. Works beautifully.
I have to hear that sometime.
Oh my God, it's available on YouTube.
Okay, I'll be there.
In fact, we did it at Sketchfest in San Francisco, which I happen to be going to on Saturday for the day to teach a workshop. But yeah, Google Maurice LaMarche. It's on YouTube. Maurice LaMarche or Pinky and the Brain doing Who's on First. It's pretty good, man. And then we did a couple of scenes from Pinky and the Brain doing scenes from the Quentin Tarantino
Reservoir Dogs.
Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
Oh, Pulp Fiction.
Pretty cool. But anyway, I don't know. When you think about it, Rocky and Bullwinkle was a pretty good one. In terms of two duos, comedy animation duos, I'm sure I'll be, your listeners will think of something else, but I can think of Rocky and Bullwinkle right offhand, and then Pinky and the Brain, I think, is right up there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying that there weren't others before, and I'm just saying like I can't. Since them, I'm not sure that I could name a duo that's just. I mean, there have been good ones. When I was younger, I was a big fan of Ren and Stimpy.
Sure.
But I don't think that. I think that just you and Maurice, what you guys brought to Pinky and the Brain, they were the perfect partners.
Well, thank you, and I think that and like Ren and Stimpy, Billy West is one of my dearest friends in the whole world, and ultimately ended up doing both characters. And I think the difference is that Ren and Stimpy was a little more edgy and adversarial and slapsticky and all that, which Billy did beautifully, and so did John Cristofalusi, before Billy. But Pinky and the Brain, there definitely is a love between those two characters, and it's exemplified really well in the Christmas. We did an episode of Pinky and the Brain Christmas, which is, and it's not just that one, but that's a great example of the love these characters have for one another, and I think that there has to be that to some extent, whether or not these characters have moments in which they want to beat the living daylights out of each other. You still have to care about them, and I believe they have to care about each other.
Yeah.
And Mo is, boy, is he a talented guy. He's remarkably gifted and working every day. He did I don't know how many episodes of Futurama, which is done now, but he is the voice of Lexus, and he and I still get to go do all kinds of fun stuff together at different events. I remember we had Jess, Tress, myself, and Maurice and I at the Salt Lake City Con, which was about 100,000 people. But when they had it in the afternoon with Animaniacs, that is Pinky and the Brain and Yakko Wacko, we had 7,000 people in there, you guys.
Oh, I know. I've been to a couple of those.
Oh my God! And we just were, we walked. I stuck my head out the curtain, and I looked at Maurice, and I said, "Are you freaking kidding me? This place is there got to be 1,500 people out there." And the organizer laughed, and he said, "1,500? That place holds 6,000 people, and they're still coming in." And we went out there, and for an hour, everybody, whether it was the song or Narf, or I think so, Brian, but me and Pippi Longstocking, I mean, what would the children look like?
That's my favorite one.
How about that? See, and I channeled it, but they loved it, and so it doesn't matter. We could have done it in Toronto, we could have done it in Florida, we could have done it in London. Those characters are pretty special, and I have to say, man, Maurice is one of those, and Tress and Jess too. They're, good, whether athletes, actors, artists, people who are good at their craft tend to, make a high tide sort of lifts all boats,
Sure.
and all those actors make me way better, and it just kind of happens sort of exponentially. And even now, when we're all together, we're still, able to do our gig. We haven't slowed down. Our brains, fortunately, aren't addled. We can still play off each other real well. And boy, it's a huge joy to be up there with those people. But I think that the audience really benefits. It's a pretty remarkable thing to see.
So when I was reading, just doing a little research before we were talking to you, I came across a tweet, and I don't know if it was recent or not. M.H. Willard tweeted to you and asked you if you ever regretted doing the voice of Bubsy And then he added, for that terrible Bubsy cartoon pilot. And you answered, not for a second. And,
Right.
And is that a general philosophy that you live
Yes.
by, that you regret nothing?
Yes, I if I were to die, and I promise I'll wait till after the interview, but if I were to die today, I may have some regrets in my life, as we all do, but none of them with respect to the work that I've done, because I was willing to take the money that someone was willing to pay me. So I then believe that I forfeit the right to complain about it.
Right.
I think that, nobody shoves a gun in your mouth to become a professional actor. And so if I'm willing to take somebody's money, and as I said earlier, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Nobody says, I'm going to really take $5 million of somebody's money and screw this up. So if I'm willing to take someone's check on more than one occasion, often, sometimes for years, and then residuals and all of that, and then go back and say, oh, my God, what was I thinking? Well, I don't think that's fair. I mean, it wasn't like I was, caught in a hotel room with Paris Hilton. It was a show that, I look back and go, that wasn't a particularly good show, but in terms of me regretting it, not for a second. No. I am as grateful for the next job that I get as the several thousand that have come before it. And I was born in Detroit and raised around Flint, Michigan, and I wanted to be a hockey player. And I learned very clearly that though I was a pretty good player as a kid, and I learned pretty early after that, by the time junior hockey came around, that I had no business trying to make a dime being a professional hockey player. As good as I thought I was in high school, well, then that's where it stopped. And so I have been incredibly fortunate, and I think I remember that tweet, and I get that kind of question all the time live. Anything you regret work-wise? Nope, not a bit. And are there things that make you cringe? Absolutely, sure. That goes without saying. And there are ththings you kind of go, maybe I shouldn't have done that or whatever. But once you make the choice to do it, then I don't have a regret, unless it was something really egregious and I should have known better. But I don't think I have anything like that. I've done some stuff that's a little bit, I'm not a regular on Family Guy or anything like that, and I would love to be, and I'm not certainly a prude, but I do understand that there are characters that I've done that are very dear to people. And so Seth Green, who's now Leonardo on Turtles, is a very good friend.
Right.
And when Seth calls and wants me to come on Robot Chicken, if he asks me to do something that sort of is a blue version of Pinky and the Brain or a blue version of Animaniacs, which is in keeping with Robot Chicken, while I understand and appreciate that it will be funny, I can't do it. Because it's not appropriate for me to do it. That's an example where I know better. And it's not because I'm a prude. They'll hire me for the show, and I do other stuff that is blue and a little off color, and it's funny, and it's adult, and I'm grateful. But I also know, having traveled around the world, that there are people to whom those characters mean way more than an action figure or just I remember watching that show. Sometimes it's something that got them through their parents' divorce.
Right.
Sometimes it's something that got mom through chemotherapy for her breast cancer. Sometimes it's the only thing that a guy connected with his father, that they had this horrible relationship. But man, when it came to Pinky and the Brain, they watched that show and laughed together, and now the old man is gone, and the guy says, wow, I'm really glad we had that. So it would be terribly inappropriate for me to take $1,000 to find a way for, Pinky to kill a hooker and put her in the trunk of a car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not, and I get why and Seth, because he's Seth and he's such a great guy, totally gets that. He'll say, I just thought I would ask. I would love to have you do this thing, but we're going to kind of take the piss out of Animaniacs. But Rob, when John Hamm comes on the show, he loves to do the show, but he can't do Don Draper. Right. He can't denigrate Mad Men because that show means too much to him and to his audience. So, once I take the money and once I sign on, then I don't regret it, and I'm hopeful that and of course my life's not over yet, but I hope that I have the temerity and the good sense to say, I see what you're doing, but if you want Pinky to read 50 Shades of Grey, I get it, and it might be really clever and funny, but I can't do it.
Right.
And I think that's a great place to end it. I know we've run up against your time.
Well, thank you, but I hope I haven't rambled. Well, wait a minute. Take that back. I know I have rambled. I hope I haven't bored you.
No, not at all. Not at all. This was just an absolute pleasure. This is so great to talk to you. I mean, we could do this easily for ananother hour.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's great, and I'd love to come back. I just I'm in LA, and it's still not too dark yet or too late yet. I have a couple of errands I got to run before the day's over. But I really am grateful that you guys have taken the time to squeeze me into your schedule, and your audience has paid attention. You know, there's a great movie, old movie with Gary Cooper called Pride of the Yankees, and he plays Lou Gehrig. You know, and for some of your younger listeners may not know that Lou Gehrig was a baseball player for whom that horrible disease was named, Lou Gehrig disease. The guy was cut down in his prime, and there's a great scene, and it's a true story, you know, and the great scene where Lou Gehrig is standing, he was the Iron Man of baseball, and finally was forced as a result of this horrible amyotrophic lateral sclerosis to retire, and he says something like, you know, people say I've been dealt a raw deal, but, you know, I got to tell you today, I feel like the luckiest man on the face of the earth, and with all due respect to Lou, I think you're talking to the luckiest man. And it's for many reasons, not the least of which is that folks like you take the time to want to hear what an old turtle has to say. So thank you guys. I really appreciate that.
Well, like you say, laughter is the best medicine.
It is. And then I say the cool thing is you can't OD and the refills are free.
That's right.
And you know it's true. Let me tell you, man. The older you get, and the stuff that you go through, and hopefully your lives will be as free from sickness and sadness as possible, but every now and then, you know, things the shit hits the fan, and boy, I'll tell you what, man, if you don't have the ability to laugh at yourself, it is a miserable way to go. So it is the best medicine, and I appreciate you guys watching and paying attention, and thanks so much to you and your listeners for giving me an opportunity to make a living. I appreciate it.
Well, that's it for this week on the Great Big Beautiful Podcast. We could have talked to him, I think, for another hour. We had so many more questions that we could have asked.
I'll let you guys in on a little secret here. We don't, these are not off the cuff, obviously. We write these questions down and we do our research. But for this, and usually I would say that we get through at least 90% of the questions that we have. We're pretty good about estimating how many we're going to get through. Rob, not even exaggerating, I think we only got through half the questions. So we hopefully picked the best ones and we picked the most interesting ones. But yeah, we easily could have done this for another hour and a half.
Oh, easily. And he's a big hockey fan, which I am too. I'm from Canada. If you didn't know, I'm from Canada. And I wanted to, if he's listening to this, I just wanted to tell him, I wanted to ask him who has more and better history, Montreal or Detroit? I think Montreal, but we won't say anything about that.
See, you're doing this when he's not even here to.
He can't even defend the Red Wings. So, Jamie, he's also we didn't mention it, and I wanted to mention it. He's on a podcast.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I wanted to talk to, because his podcast, Talkin' Tunes, is one of my must-listen shows. I think it's just phenomenal. I mean, if you're a fan of his, it's a no-brainer. But if you have any interest in animation or voice acting, it's a fascinating insight into the industry, and it's just crazy entertaining, because it's basically it's just him and his friends, because he knows everybody, and they just come on and they just talk. You know, they reminisce, they talk memories, they talk about what they're doing now, they talk about, you know, they just share stories, like. And it's just, you laugh and you learn a lot too. But the laughing is the most important thing. I mean, there are a lot of podcasts out there that are not worth the subscribe click. We're one. Talkin' Tunes is absolutely a second. So if you guys have not been listening along, go check it out, click subscribe, and just start. He's been doing it for years now, and there's a hefty backlog. So
for our first ever "What Are We Listening To" segment,
Talkin' Tunes.
We're gonna put Talkin' Tunes in it.
Yeah.
Please tell me he's had Tony Bancroft on his show. Because I feel like that would be an awesome episode.
You know, I know he's had Tad Stones on.
Okay.
Not exactly sure if he's had Tony on.
Well, we're gonna have to suggest that to him.
Yes.
Tell him how to do his podcast. You know,
because he hasn't been doing it for like 5 years.
Exactly. He doesn't have a bigger audience or anything probably. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming this week. As always, we are so thankful that you take the time to download, take the time to listen, and subscribe. If you liked what you heard, please send us a tweet. Please send us an email. I don't know how you can email us, but find our email somehow. Send us a tweet at the GBB podcast. Send us a Facebook message, facebook.com/the GBB podcast. And you can also call us.
You could call us. You can call us at 301-825-5653. Alternatively, you could just send Rob a tweet and let him know that you listened to him, that you heard him on the show, and that you really enjoyed it. Hopefully you really enjoyed it.
And then when you're done, write a review. Do all those things for
okay,
us.
we're asking way too much.
Yeah, we are. Okay, if you're going to do one thing,
let Rob know.
Let Rob know you liked him. If you're going to do two things, write a review. No.
And come back next week.
And then come back next week and you can do the other two things. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great week. I'm Justin Connors at 140 Justin C.
And I'm Jamie Green at the Roarbots. Take care.
And you've been great, big, beautiful podcasted. Goodbye.
This podcast has been a production of the Geek Dad Podcast Network. If you've enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/geekdad.